Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the person who knew what you took in your coffee, who heard you come through the door every evening, who was simply there, is gone. Not gone the way the young grieve, gone after 20, 25, 30 years of a shared life. Gone after a house that held birthdays and arguments and ordinary Tuesday nights. Gone after a future that had already been planned together. The silence that follows is something few people are prepared for. Researchers who study this phenomenon, divorce after the age of 50, gave it a name: grey divorce. What they found is that the emotional experience of ending a long marriage is profoundly different from other forms of loss. The grief is not simply about the end of a relationship. It is the loss of a shared history, a shared identity, and a future that no longer exists. The pain is documented, and the science is specific. Grey divorce doubled between 1990 and 2010. Today, nearly 36% of all divorces in the United States involve someone 50 years old or older. 1 out of every 4 divorces is now classified as a grey divorce. These are not people who gave up lightly. These are people who, in many cases, spent decades building a life with someone, raising children, surviving difficult years, making it through losses and setbacks side by side. And then, often after a crisis or a long accumulation of quiet distance, the marriage ended. What follows is rarely discussed with the seriousness it deserves. The end of a long marriage does not simply end a relationship. It dismantles an entire structure of daily life. The loneliness that researchers consistently document after grey divorce is not only about being physically alone. It is what psychologists describe as emotional loneliness, an internal sense of disconnection, of being unmoored from the context that once gave life its shape. Studies have found consistent associations between divorce and depression, anxiety, grief, and social isolation. But for those who divorce after 50, these effects carry particular weight. After decades of shared routines, shared social circles, and shared identity, the loss is layered in ways that younger divorce rarely is. Consider what disappears: the person who knew your history, the mutual friends who quietly drift away or feel forced to choose sides, the holiday traditions, the family home, the extended family on a spouse's side that, without any formal agreement, simply stops being yours. Research confirms that divorce results in network shrinking and a loss of shared relationships, and that for older adults, these losses frequently do not recover in the years that follow. If this is reaching you at a moment when that description feels accurate, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. This conversation continues here, and there is more ahead that speaks directly to this experience. For men in particular, the research reveals a pattern that is rarely discussed openly. Studies show that many men rely on their partners to manage relationships with extended family and to maintain social calendars. When the marriage ends, and that connective function disappears, many men do not independently rebuild those connections. The result, researchers describe, is social isolation that can become chronic. Data from longitudinal studies on marital dissolution found that loneliness levels among men over 50 spiked sharply around the time of separation. And, while they gradually declined, many men remained vulnerable for long periods afterward. That sustained loneliness, researchers note, is linked to broader health consequences. Professor Jocelyn Elise Crowley, who conducted extensive research on grey divorce in the United States, found that men and women experience the aftermath in meaningfully different ways. Men become more socially isolated. That isolation, in most cases, is not visible. It settles in quietly, behind closed doors, without announcing itself. there is a separate dimension of grey divorce that is also poorly understood. What happens to a person's sense of identity? After decades inside a long marriage, identity becomes structurally connected to the role of spouse and partner. The daily sense of purpose, the social position, the understanding of who one is, all of it is built within the frame of that relationship. When that frame is removed, many people experience what psychologists describe as a collapse of the self. The question that emerges is not only what to do next, it is who one is now that the defining relationship is gone. Researchers have documented that the emotional distress following long-term separation frequently mirrors the clinical stages of grief, moving through denial, anger, depression, and eventually acceptance. Grief, sadness, anger, confusion, and sometimes relief can coexist. All of these responses are documented. All of them are normal. There is also a psychological mechanism researchers identify as future time perspective. The perception that there is not enough time remaining to rebuild or start again. This mindset is common in older adults navigating major life transitions and has been associated with higher levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. The future, which once felt open, can begin to feel foreclosed. The impact on adult children is another area where assumptions tend to be wrong. It is often assumed that adult children handle their parents' divorce more easily than young children would. Research challenges that assumption. When a long marriage ends, adult children frequently report significant emotional strain, feelings of loss, shock, and destabilization. The family home may be sold. Holiday traditions disappear. The family structure that had defined their own identity, sometimes across 4 generations, is abruptly altered. Studies show that after a grey divorce, adult children tend to gravitate toward their mother. The separation can double the odds of frequent maternal contact. The father's situation is more fragile. His relationship with adult children is more susceptible to disruption, particularly if he enters a new relationship. The loss of close contact with children in later life has documented consequences for mental health, given that older adults already face elevated rates of social isolation. Researchers also describe a phenomenon they call parentification, a role reversal in which adult children become emotional mediators and support figures for one or both parents. This dynamic places a burden on those relationships that, in different circumstances, might have served as a source of stability. The rebuilding that follows grey divorce is a slow and non-linear process. Studies show that people who engage with therapy after divorce demonstrate significantly better psychological adjustment within 6 to 12 months compared to those who navigate it alone. Renewed social connections, structured routines, and re-engagement with personal interests have all been associated with genuine recovery. The process, researchers consistently find, is not about returning to a prior self. It is about redefining what life looks like outside of the marriage that shaped it, reconstructing identity on different terms. One case documented in Psychology Today described a woman of 60 who had lived with loneliness and mild depression for 9 years following her grey divorce. Recovery, the research shows, does not follow a fixed timeline. But the evidence also shows it is not closed off by age or by the length of what was lost. Grey divorce is not a statistical trend or a demographic footnote. It is the lived experience of millions of people who spent the most formative decades of their lives building something with someone, and who then found themselves on the other side of it, navigating a silence that no one fully prepared them for. The grief is real. The social losses are documented. The collapse of identity is a recognized psychological consequence, and the path through it, slow, specific, and supported by evidence, exists. If this video described something you have lived or are living now, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment below. Share where you are in this process, what phase you are in, what has been hardest, what has surprised you. Your experience matters to this conversation and to others who are navigating the same silence. Next on this channel, what happens to your sense of self after a long marriage ends, and what the research says about how identity actually rebuilds itself after grey divorce.